We'll now call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. Our next order of business is the agenda review. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
I have none.
No. Then we'll move on. And if our attorney could please ask about conflicts of interest.
Good morning, Commissioners. You've all had the opportunity to review the agenda for this morning's meeting. Please disclose whether any of the matters to be discussed this morning presents a conflict of interest.
I have no conflict of interest.
I have no conflicts.
I have one. I'll just pass by you. I don't think it is, but in the fee schedule, I do have an active building permit open, but we're not changing the fee this time around. So I don't know if it's really a conflict. I've paid my fee.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll move on to public or press comment. The comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person, and our county manager, Ray Breers, will keep time. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
We do, Mickey Hogan.
Good morning. And if you please state your name and address for us, please, and you'll need to pull the microphone up. There you go. Thank you.
My name's Mickey Colchin. I reside at 563 Morningstar Circle in Blackhawk. And I'm here because my property has had an issue.
I'm just going to raise this up for you. So
I've had an issue on my property with the septic system that has been well documented recently. And I've been doing more research since the last time I spoke and become very discerned over the fact that I had the county records on my septic system pulled. There's 80 pages of records that was never disclosed when I was buying my house. And these are serious, some of these are serious aspects where the county neglected to follow through and make sure things were done as they should have been. So that is very concerning to me. And I've walked into a mess that I shouldn't have had to, because I got a certificate when I bought the house saying that the septic system was perfectly fine and running properly, and it wasn't. So I know the health department saying that they're working on finding a way to prevent this from happening to someone else. That's not helping me. And now they're threatening to put a cease and desist and make me to force me out of my house. That's not an acceptable solution. I've rented a porta potty, so there is no sewage going into the system at all anymore. The only thing going in it right now is gray water. And I'm working on I've had some communication with Base Camp to where if I can't get the loan that I'm very close to getting, and hopefully it'll be before the end of the month, so we can get this project done and over with and be finished with it. I've been talking with Base Camp in case we need to switch and take showers somewhere else. Or I'm looking at all options for showers to reduce anything going into the septic system at all. But I'm very concerned that how many things have slid through the cracks over the years. Starting, these records go back to 1981, but the major problem started in 2001 when an extension was put on the house, and they did not require the septic system to be expanded.
30
They
seconds.
were over doubling the house, the size of the house. That should have been a red flag right there. And then there was an issue where there was issues with the system failing, or expected that it was failing. And the homeowner at the time was told she had to replace the system. Nobody followed through to make sure she did it. She paid, she pulled a permit, she had a design done. Nobody followed through to make sure that it was actually done.
3
If
minutes.
that had been done, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this now. And then the house was sold in 2013, again, giving it the septic system a full, perfectly fine, when it obviously wasn't. when it had already been said it had to be replaced and wasn't. And then I come along and the next one stuck with it. And I'm looking at between a $45,000 and $50,000 repair that I shouldn't be having to deal with at this time. So I'm appealing to the board to not do this, force me out of my house, let me stay there, doing everything I can, nothing going into the system starting December 1st, so that I can get this resolved. Because if I have to, my family has to move out of the house, it will go to foreclosure because I can't pay a mortgage and rent somewhere else. It will go into foreclosure, and then the system's not going to get fixed again. And I've been, since 6 months after I moved into this house, I have been being harassed, lied about, accused of crimes by my neighbors, which is enough stress having to deal with that. I don't need any other added stress. Let me just get the problem solved. That's the best solution for everybody. Me, my neighbors, the county, everybody. Give me the time to get it done.
Okay, thank you. And do we have
Thank you,
anyone
Nikki.
else? No. Okay. Is there anyone online?
Anyone online, Commissioner Berman?
Okay, then we'll now close the public and press comment. And we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do we have any changes to the consent agenda?
I have no changes.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the consent agenda. Do you want me to read all of the items?
No, I think.
Okay. There are 6 resolutions, 1 minutes for the September 24th meeting, and a letter of support. And the clerk's end of month report.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Since I'm choking,
I know.
I said there are 6 resolutions, the September 24th minutes, and the clerk and recorder's end of month report, and a letter of support for NOCO. That's all the items.
I'd like to make a comment on the Lexus Nooks Resolution 24-149 has some scrivener errors.
Okay, we'll see that they're finished. So then is there a second?
Second.
Okay, having a motion in the second, all in favor?
Aye.
And the consent agenda is approved 3-0. Move on to, we have new hire introductions, and Shanda Johnson, our Human Resources Director, is here. Good morning.
Good morning. We have one team here today to do introductions, so I'm going to invite Ryan up to go ahead and conduct those. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'd like to introduce Camden Rieger. Camden has joined us as a new Tech 1, the maintenance division. Comes to us with some HVAC experience already, and look forward to seeing him grow.
Okay. Great,
Welcome, Kendall.
welcome. It's good. And so we're getting close to full staff.
We're close. One more position.
There we go. Good job. Thank you.
Do you want to tell us anything about yourself? It's optional.
Oh.
All right. Well, welcome.
Welcome. We're glad to have you here on staff.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Pictures.
Okay, and now we'll move on for our sexually oriented businesses impact study. We have Tanya Settles from Paradigm Public Affairs to present. Morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
If it's okay with you, it's a little easier for me to stand, if that's all right.
Oh, okay, that's fine if you're comfortable.
Let me see if I can grab
You
this.
can move the microphone.
One of the things I've learned is with the cane, you only have one hand. Okay. Just for fun, let's see if the clicker works. Oh, look
There
at
we
that.
go.
All right. Everyone, thank you again, commissioners. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Tanya Settles with Paradigm Public Affairs, and I'm here to talk about the sexually oriented business impact study and the results and what that means for the county. So as you know, the purpose and scope of this study really was to assess what the opportunity for secondary impacts associated with sexually oriented businesses in the city of Central. We focused our study on corollary impacts to the county, particularly under the intergovernmental agreement. We looked at things like costs associated with what potential secondary impacts, if any, are, how they impact renegotiation of that IGA between the city and the county. Our process, just so you have some background about what we did and why we did it, followed three general phases. The first was qualitative data collection and analysis. Many of you commissioners, actually all of you, participated in a conversation with me or one of our associates, but we talked to a whole bunch of people throughout the county, including representatives from the city of Central. We talked with industry experts. We communicated with Eric Langen. We've did a deep dive into published empirical research. And what I mean by that is we looked at studies in particular that were published in peer-reviewed articles, meaning that they were blind reviewed and published and were as accurate information as we could possibly get. We used that information that we gathered from understanding the narrative of what sexually oriented businesses are, what they mean for Gilpin County, and developed a series of factors that were important. Those factors came from those conversations, our analysis of how we collected those data, or our analysis of the data we collected, rather, and developed a series of 6. And we'll talk about what those are in just a minute. Those 6 factors fed into the quantitative data analysis. So for quantitative data, we used data that the county provided to us. We did not collect any primary data, meaning that we did not conduct a survey. We didn't collect any independent data. We used the data that the county provided. And in some cases, we had a little bit of data from the Black Hawk Police Department about mutual aid. From those data, we were able to determine what likely secondary impacts may be and the costs associated with them under 3 different scenarios. And we'll talk about those scenarios in a little bit more detail. Then we focused on planning for the future because sexually oriented businesses in Gilpin County don't exist right now and probably won't for some period of time. You have an opportunity to think about, what does this mean for the county? What are the impacts for the county? How do we collaborate with the city of Central to make sure that you're prepared, that people stay safe, because we're interested primarily in public safety issues. How do people stay safe? And how does the county recover costs associated with providing law enforcement services in the city of Central? And we have some recommendations related to that. Now I have oh, go ahead. You can change. No, it can't. No, it doesn't want to change. We're having a technology issue. Hold on 1 minute for me. Oh. Is that okay? Okay. I don't know what happened. You know, these days, if there's not a technology failure, you haven't really had a public meeting, right? Usually it's Zoom. Today, it's going to be the slides. So let me talk a little bit about how we assess risk of secondary impacts. What our team did is we applied that same overall approach that is historically recognized by the courts, because one of the things that was really important to us is that this passed legal muster to the extent that it possibly could. We didn't want to come out of nowhere with an assessment that wouldn't be acknowledged by the courts, that wouldn't be viewed as being truthful, that wouldn't be unbiased. So what we did is we used those empirical studies and we did a deep dive. Empirical studies, the problem with them is that they occur in other places. And there's no place like Gilpin County. There's no place like Central City anywhere, which I consider to be a really, really good thing. It's part of our history in the state. We recognize it throughout the state. We value the contributions of Gilpin County and the city of Central to our history, but it also means that applying empirical studies that were conducted typically in large urban areas created, excuse me, a few challenges. Again, we went back to assessing, we looked at the terms of the intergovernmental agreement, it's IGA, not IAG, and we focused on those issues associated with law enforcement and public safety, though there are other issues that you could consider in the future. And I'm ready for a next slide. So I've talked a little bit about the qualitative data methodology. The thing I want to add to the enormous amount of qualitative data that we collected is that we didn't just collect it and read it and draw some conclusions. All of those data were broken down. Those data were deductively coded and analyzed using a thematic procedure and process, so that we understood what the key issues was. So even in those cases where there is a lot of qualitative data and a lot of opinion and a lot of perspective, there's still an analytic process behind it that led to the conclusions that we had. We focused that part of the process on identifying what potential secondary impacts associated with sexually oriented businesses, or SOBs, may be for the county. Those impacts that we identified include buffer zone distance, if any, property crimes, crimes against people, public disorder offenses. Those are things like public intoxication, lower level mayhem, lower things like criminal mischief, vandalism. We also looked at medical calls for service to the extent that we were able to, and location. Location in this case, by the way, means district, zoning district. So the first recommendation I want to talk about is that it's important for the county, as you continue to explore what sexually oriented businesses mean for you and the impact that they have on county government, is to review first your own land use codes. The land use codes that you have in place right now are the same, almost verbatim, as pretty much anywhere else in the country, and that is a very good thing. But now, because there is a pause, as a result of federal litigation and because of a rezoning decision that the city of Central made, you have an opportunity to take a look a little bit more deeply around the regulatory structure. So what the courts tell us when you're looking at zoning issues associated with sexually oriented businesses is that it's important to balance free speech with public safety. The courts recognize that that balance exists. So as you continue to explore what this means, there's a few things for the county to keep in mind. One is make the emphasis on secondary effects, not an emphasis on whether you personally agree or approve of, or as a political entity believe there's a good or bad aspect. Focus on the secondary impacts, those things that happen around sexually oriented businesses that may be positive and may be negative. And then the literature says most are negative, not all. Also, take into consideration privacy concerns, and the courts have always recognized time, place, and manner restrictions. So what that means for you, for the county, is that you have an opportunity to look at your regulations and say, We as a county say that sexually oriented businesses can operate within a specific period of time, that they can be located in a particular place or a zoning district. And you can also limit the manner in which those operations occur. One of the ways you can do that is by looking at the opportunity for your own regulatory structure, in addition to the one that the City of Central has proposed, that might include things like licensing for performers, licensing for the business. And then the other thing, and this is really, really important, is non-discriminatory zoning. So you can't zone them out, but so there always has to be a place in a government, in a jurisdiction, whether it's a county or a municipal government, for a place for sexually oriented businesses to operate. You can't ban them. So by using time, place, and manner restrictions, you can get a little bit of control over how those businesses operate. And next slide. So the second recommendation is for the county to collaborate with the City of Central to manage misinformation. When we were working within that first phase, that qualitative data assessment phase, where we talked to a lot of people, stakeholders, government leaders, not community members, by the way, we learned that there was a lot of misinformation about what the plan was related to sexually oriented businesses. For example, we heard concerns from people that there was a plan to open a 2-hour motel. We explored that plan. A couple members of our team, we talked with the city about it, found out that is not true. That is not part of the business structure. However, people were concerned about it. While we didn't interview or directly engage with members of the community, we did attend a number of public sessions where community members were speaking and found out that they may have had some less than accurate information about what the business plan was. So we see this as an opportunity for the county to say, okay, if this is going to happen, if we're going to, and it will, you need to zone for, the city needs to zone for them. You can't ban them. So if there's going to be sexually oriented businesses within Gilpin County, whether that's a municipal government or in the county itself, then host some listening sessions so people have the right information, gain information, invite business forums, talk to business owners, talk to people who are operating businesses on Main Street, and create those opportunities for public discourse so that you're able to clarify the plans, you can control the narrative a little bit more, give people good, reliable information about what this means, and be able to look at this as an economic development opportunity that may or may not include sexually oriented businesses in Central City. And I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. So in the quantitative phase, I want to talk a little bit, and I want to be really, really clear and honest with everyone here, particularly you commissioners, about where data limitations lie. Biggest limitation is there are no pre and post test data. So it's really difficult to assess what is the impact of a sexually oriented business that doesn't exist and has never historically existed in the city. So typically, methodologically, what we would do is we'd say, okay, here's the level of crime associated with secondary impacts before the business is opened, and here's the level of crime after, and then look at the difference, if there was any difference at all. We don't have those data, they don't exist. So we also had some data, our data analysis was limited to data that came from the Sheriff's Office and the Gilpin County Ambulance Authority and a number of departments within the city. I also have to disclose, and I want to explain what a proxy variable is, because we used a proxy variable. What a proxy variable does is it takes information from a similarly situated kind of source, and we apply it here. So remember when I said we use that court-tested that approach that many other places do, where we look at what happened in other cities and we applied it here? That's our proxy variable for crime. So it's not a perfect number. It is an estimate. So I'm not promising you that if sexually oriented businesses open for business in the city of Central, you definitely will see this amount of crime. What we're saying is this is an estimate based on what's happened in other places. We've also noticed that there were a number of data gaps. Again, and I'm not laying blame. This is not a critique of your data. This is not a critique of staff, of leadership at Gilpin County. This is the reality. This is a new thing for you. This is not an indictment, but there are data gaps throughout other departments about, well, we know, for example, we know that victim services spends about 3% of their time, their caseload is associated with Central City. And well, a little bit more than 3%. Because what we found out is if we pulled out all of those crimes that are associated or generally associated with secondary impacts, that equates to about 3% of victim services. However, those data aren't perfect either because you've never had to track those data before. So you'll see a number of recommendations, and we'll talk about them, that really have to do with gathering more data so you can make better decisions. And then the last point here is that we don't really know where SOBs, and I'll use the term SOB, though I still think it is the most unfortunate acronym in the history of acronyms. We don't know where they're going to be located. And that's because of a decision that Central City made through the Board of Aldermen to rezone SOBs from the historic downtown gaming district and the Gregory Gulch gaming district, and move that zoning to the industrial, move that authorization to the industrial zone. And what that does is it effectively bans SOBs in downtown Central City and moves it to a place where there's no available land. As a result of that decision, so the first reading was in August, the second reading was in September. Right after the first reading, RCI Hospitality Holdings filed a federal lawsuit claiming constitutional violations associated with free speech and due process, primarily. There's a huge backlog in federal cases right now, so we don't know when that will be heard. And for that reason, when that happened, we communicated with the county, and we said that the likelihood of a sexually oriented business opening as an SOB in Central City is unlikely for fiscal year 2025 and probably well into 2026, just based on what we know about that federal case backlog. But we don't know where they're going to go. And that creates some opportunities for us. So what we did is we created, thanks. What we did is we created a series of scenarios based on what the knowledge that we had, the information, and the empirical research. So scenario one is that sexually oriented businesses are not zoned anywhere in downtown Central City. So our assumptions for this are that current zoning restrictions that limit SOBs to the industrial zone are going to stay in place. The information that we have also says that Rick's Cabaret will open at 130 Main Street, the former Starlet's building, but it'll open as a high-end steakhouse that may or may not include live performances. Now, one of the options when we looked at what goes on in other cities, particularly cities that have particularly restrictive ordinances about sexually oriented businesses, we looked, for example, at San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio, Texas has some of the strictest ordinances in the country. What happens in San Antonio, Texas is that while in some places nude performances are actually not allowed, they're not authorized, what occurs is that performers wear latex bodysuits that mimic a nude body, but technically they're clothed, and therefore they're not operating as a sexually oriented business. We don't know for certain if this is the plan, but it is one possibility. So when we figured out that there is something where the business model could be inspired by an SOB business model, it doesn't necessarily meet that constitutional or that legal requirement of being an SOB. So we moved forward with, let's say, hypothetically, that scenario one is that RCI Hospitality Holdings will open Rick's Cabaret that may include or may not performers, live performances of people who are wearing latex bodysuits that make them look, well, nude. So under that scenario, and I'm ready, thank you. Under that scenario, remember I said we applied a proxy variable. Our proxy variable for crime associated with sexually oriented businesses, assuming that they were operating under an SOB-esque business model, was about a 13.3% increase in those offenses or crimes that are most typically associated with SOBs. In this case, for Gilpin County, under the intergovernmental agreement, that means an increase of about 190 calls per year for those services that are for calls for service rather, that are most closely connected to secondary impacts. And that carries a financial impact to the county of about, based on your 2025 budget, and some terms that were in the intergovernmental agreement that looked at actual direct costs associated with providing public safety services in Central City, comes to a financial impact of about $135,000 for that one single sexually oriented business. Under scenario 2, we have to assume that because zoning is currently limited to the industrial zone, right now, the industrial zone is pretty much entirely occupied by a quarry. There is no available land. So in order for SOBs to be able to build there has to be a land annexation or another intergovernmental agreement between the county and the city to permit those SOB type businesses. So, but for right now, SOBs are restricted to the industrial zone with a 1,000-foot buffer. We identified one study that actually addressed crime impacts in rural areas for zoning that is often interstate and exit often interstate, very similarly to I-70 and the Central City Parkway. In that study, the crime and disorder impact was about a 61% increase in non-traffic related calls for service in the industrial zone. Now, I mentioned non-traffic related calls for service primarily because most of the calls, most of the law enforcement response in that general area is actually traffic related. So for this scenario, if there were an SOB1 to open in the industrial zone, we would anticipate a 61% increase in calls for service for offenses that are most typically associated with SOBs. That is an increase of about 32 offenses per year. Excuse me. That carries a fiscal impact of about $23,000 for the county, based again on the current intergovernmental agreement and what you're considering in terms of budget for 2025. Scenario 3 is a little bit more complicated. Scenario 3 takes into consideration that, let's say that RCI Hospitality Holdings wins their federal lawsuit. And that means that Central City would likely return to the original ordinance, which puts SOBs in the area we're in now, actually, the Historic Gaming District, the Gregory Gulch Gaming District. But because of some previous conversations between the city and RCI, that buffer zone is reduced to 150 feet or less, or somewhere in that proximity. So if they keep the buffer zone at 1,000 feet, then they basically are still zoning SOBs out of the city. So with this result, things get a little bit more, it gets a little bit more complex. So we're going to use that same proxy variable of a 13.3% increase in calls for service per SOB under the same logic as we did with scenario 1. However, RCI Hospitality Holdings actually owns up to 8 of the commercial properties in one or both of those 2 zones. And we looked at them together because they're in close proximity and they had similar original zoning restrictions. So the current estimate is that there's about 190 calls for service for each SOB. If, and this is a big if all 8 of those commercial properties were developed as sexually oriented businesses, then you'd be looking at a crime impact of about, based again on that proxy variable and what we know, which is imperfect knowledge, imperfect information, we're looking at an increase of about 1,500-ish additional SOB associated crime calls for service per year. Now, that carries a pretty significant fiscal impact. That carries a fiscal impact of a little over about $1.1 million. But it's also assuming, and this is a big assumption, that that is the maximum number of SOBs that would open in Central City. But here's the reality. We had the opportunity to talk with the city. We've had the city of Central. We had conversations with RCI Hospitality Holdings. And what we learned is that that is not their business model. That is not what the plan is. That while they do own property, commercial property, the plan is to develop it into other sorts of businesses, for example, salons, other retail establishments, possibly possibly additional restaurants or places like that. So not necessarily SOBs. However, we had to look at the range, right? We had to look at, here's what happens if there's one. Here's what likely happens if there's one. Here's what happens if all 8 are developed. So take that $1.1 million with a little bit of a grain of salt. So all of this information brings us to the, and I have to say, this is not a surprise, I don't think, for any of us here. Renegotiation of the intergovernmental agreement is really dependent on the development of SOBs and what happens within the city. It is more likely than not that the development of a sexually oriented business or businesses that are inspired by an SOB model will result in additional costs associated with secondary impacts. Now, you are our client, Gilpin County. We are working for you. So we are looking at what are your impacts under any variety of things that could happen, including economic development that isn't necessarily tied to SOBs. All of those things create public safety impacts. When there are more people in a place who are going to more businesses and businesses are thriving, regardless of what kind of business they are, that also creates an impact for the county that you need to accommodate and capture under the intergovernmental agreement, or at least that would be my recommendation. So we suggest that the county continues to monitor what's going on in the legal and policy developments in Central City related to SOBs, and then continue to renegotiate that intergovernmental agreement on an annual basis beginning in 2026, because there's not going to be a lot of difference in 2025. The other recommendation, I hinted at this a little bit earlier, is to increase that victim services budget to correspond with increases in call load that are due to secondary impacts. So as I mentioned earlier, we looked at victim services and the types of what their call load was, what they were responding to. And for 2025, their estimated expenditures are around $293,000. So if one of these 3 scenarios plays out in 2025 or later, then that we recommend an additional request of a baseline of $9,500 per year under the intergovernmental agreement for victim services in particular. And that's associated with responding to calls or a call load with those offenses that are most likely associated with secondary impacts of a sexually oriented business. So for recommendation 5, we had the opportunity to talk with the Gilpin County, with the Gilpin Ambulance Authority, rather, to include, we wanted to see, what does your call look like? What does that mean? And we learned a lot of things. For example, we know that the Gilpin Ambulance Authority is more likely to respond to calls on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday than they are Sunday through Wednesday. We learned that a good majority of the calls that they respond to are actually associated with the gaming industry. But what we weren't able to determine, and again, not an indictment of Gilpin Ambulance Authority or anyone else, you've never had to collect this data, is it was really hard to figure out which of those calls for service are most likely associated with a baseline measure of secondary impacts associated with SOBs? And we weren't able to, this is one area where we weren't able to come to an estimate. But what we are recommending is that if an SOB is established in Central City, that the county work with Gilpin Ambulance Authority to make sure that those data are being captured so you can assess it on an annual basis. Very similarly to how they separate out calls for service that are kind of run-of-the-mill calls for service, or calls for service that are associated with gaming. Because the calls for service that are associated with gaming, there's some funding available there. Same thing, the same thing may apply here. So that's what we found. Again, significant data limitations. However, there's an opportunity here for the county to prepare for what comes next. One of them is to deal with what those data limitations are. If there's anything that's super valuable, I think, to the county, it's to understand what kind of data do we need to make evidence-informed decisions that benefit the county and are fair to the city of Central. One of them is to get an estimate of the average daily population. We tried. The data did not come in before we had to move on to report writing. We had a timeline for this. You needed an answer much more quickly. But I will tell you that data related to average daily population is out there. The Clear Creek Economic Development Corporation may be able to access some of that data. They were going to try to do some modeling for us, and they weren't able to. And we appreciate very much their willingness to help. We also know that there are data that are possibly related that come from the Department of Transportation that tracks traffic going in and out of the area. However, we also know that there's a lot of guesses about data. We made one ourselves about what average daily population looks like. So one of the things that makes Gilpin County and Central City and Blackhawk really unique is you have very small populations and small full-time resident populations and potentially huge average daily populations due to the gaming industry. So our first recommendation is find out what the average daily population is. There's a number of ways that you can do it. We'd be happy to work with you. The second recommendation is that, the second finding rather, is that it is possible that under the intergovernmental agreement, law enforcement staffing in Central City does not quite meet the needs of Central City, that staffing is short. Now, that's no surprise to anybody who has talked about staffing in law enforcement over the last 2 to 4 years. Staffing, it's hard. There are shortages for departments, sheriff's departments, and police departments across the nation. However, we do strongly feel, because of the evidence and some of the things that we observed that included things like mutual aid calls from Blackhawk Police Department to Central City, they average 2 a day. Somewhere in there, at least that point of data that we were able to gather. And we looked at some similarly sized jurisdictions. So one of the places we looked at was Edgewater. And here's the reason why. Edgewater's urban. It's super urban. They're bordering Denver, but Edgewater is 1 square mile of land. It's one mile. And Central City is, well, the richest mile on earth, right? So we looked at what was going on in Edgewater, and we found that there's some big differences, and those are detailed in the report. We also, early on in our assessment, we're trying to get a handle on that average daily population. So one of the things we did is we said, well, if we don't know what average daily population is, let's look and see what is the crime impact population. So what are we looking at in terms of, because crime is reported by the number of residents, it's not reported by what's happening in terms of tourism. Crime is based on, people who live there. For example, Central City, what is it, about 750 people live in Central City. Your crime impact, it makes it look like the crime capital of the world in Central City. It is not. It's a city that manages a crime equivalent population of about 5,600. Now, when we talked with folks throughout the county of, does this feel about right to you? The answer was no, we think there's a lot more. We think there's a lot more. We don't know. So in addition to finding out what is that average daily population, how does it shift, we recommend a staffing study that is focused on Central City, knowing that the county has conducted a staffing study for the county overall. But we're recommending that the county collaborate with the city of Central to engage in a law enforcement staffing study to make sure that the intergovernmental agreement covers the needs of Central City, but it also covers the county's needs in terms of staffing and resources and cost recovery. The staffing, there's a lot of ways to look at staffing studies. There's a back of the envelope way, which I've done. I actually did it for the Portland Police Bureau in Oregon because the mayor wanted to know how short are we. I'm like, well, you can use this method. It's a back of the envelope method. I gave him an answer, not perfect. The gold standard for a staffing study is actually the rule of 30, or the rule of 60, rather. And there's some details in the report about what that rule of 60 looks like. It's a methodology that was designed by ICMA, the International City County Managers Association, because it's usually city and county managers who want that staffing study, done. That is the gold standard. If you're looking for what an example looks like that's kind of a neighbor to you, look to the city of Boulder. They had one done about 2 years ago using the rule of 60 methodology. Now, one of the benefits to using the rule of 60 is that it also allows you to fill in some of those data gaps that you have about what are the secondary crime impacts. So you can build that in, collect the data as throughout time, get a good baseline measure that will help you renegotiate the intergovernmental agreement, and then provide you with some insight about what staffing specifically in Central City, almost like you were an independent law enforcement agency for them. It also gives Central City some insight down the line at some point in time. Maybe they need to, they need or want to reestablish a law enforcement agency. It gives them a baseline measure. So we think that this is a collaborative opportunity. It's not one that either Central City or Gilpin County should solely bear the cost of, share the cost on this one. So recommendation 7, and this is the last recommendation, is to establish a baseline related to human trafficking activity. Now, human trafficking activity is really hard to track. You don't find it. There's not a law that says, oh, this is a human trafficking. This is a labor trafficking violation, or this is a sex trafficking violation. What happens is those crimes occur. You see them, but they're captured as other types of crimes. And so we think that there's an opportunity here for the sheriff's office to consider collecting data that specifically pertains to sex and labor trafficking for 2 reasons. One is there's particularly high risk of both sex and labor trafficking with sexually oriented businesses. Second, human trafficking is being noted in the city of Black Hawk, probably partly as an area of enforcement and interest for the Black Hawk Police Department and those giant casino resort spas where it's a little bit easier to hide. And because as we talked to stakeholders throughout the county, there was an interest on getting a handle on what human trafficking looks like, either labor or sex. And so we are recommending that the Sheriff's Department look at how to assess whether that's occurring, possibly including, not just in Central City, but other unincorporated areas of Gilpin County. You're rural. It's easy to hide here. Not that I think you are, Sheriff, by the way. So that takes us through most of the recommendations. It was a lot of detail. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing me to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Sheriff Armstrong, did you want to join us up here with any questions as well?
Morning.
Questions or comments want to start with?
Oh, I had a comment on recommendation 3, when you indicated that there's a possibility that if there is a successful business, whether it's SOB or quasi SOB, that other, and the intention, the initial plan is to have other businesses like salons and restaurants and things like that. Is that restrictive as to the type of people who are coming here, the type of retail businesses they would have? I mean, it would seem difficult for me. It seemed difficult to have a family-oriented business on Main Street when you're drawing in mostly adults, which is happening now, but that would even be accentuated. So when you talk about the possibility of having an additional revenue because you'll have additional businesses around in the area, is what was, I mean, that was our CI's plan, I think, but what do you see, has seen in your research? What type of businesses to run that? Mhm.
Well, I have to take RCI at their word, because I have no reason to not believe them. That the plan is to include a number of retail establishments. Now, you know, certainly their business model is adult entertainment. But one of the things that they said is, you know, it would be nice to have a spa. We have performers. Performers need to have a salon to go to get ready for performances. That was one of the suggestions. However, make that open to other people as well. In Central City, the economic engine really still is adult or age-restricted businesses. So as you look down the street, and I do, I really like it here. But as you look down the street, you see that there's a lot of casinos, age restricted. You see retail marijuana, age restricted. Good sources of revenue, but age restricted. So how the city makes decisions to create more family-friendly opportunities, I'll be really honest, I don't know. That's a decision for them to make and for you commissioners to make with them, if you have the opportunity to do so. What we do know is that the city of Central is running at a budget deficit, that they've been running at a budget deficit for some time, and they are actively looking for ways to improve the economic foundation through new business development. What those businesses, the offer on the table or the proposal on the table 2 years ago was sexually oriented businesses. I don't know that that's the same now.
I guess my question was, when you did your research and you were looking at other municipalities, what did you see as the type of businesses that were developed around SOBs?
So very often in published research, SOBs are actually located in industrial zones.
Okay.
So that wasn't an unusual choice, to move zoning to an industrial zone. So you'll see them like in light industrial zones in some places. The exceptions that we found, and we looked at other cities. So one of the things that we did, and I'm sure you probably saw this, is, well, let's find out what happens in Cripple Creek. Cripple Creek is outside of Blackhawk in Central City. They're the closest similarly situated municipal government. So we reached out to them and it was very clear. And they do have an SOB ordinance. It reads almost identically to yours and to Central Cities. They don't want sexually oriented businesses. They have no plans on changing their zoning to allow them. They're perfectly happy with the way that it is. So then we looked at other places. Taking a hint actually from you commissioners to look what happens and what about other places where there's tourism. So we contacted Pitkin County and Aspen. We looked at Summit County and Breckenridge, Eagle County and Vail. And there are no live performance sexually oriented businesses in any of those places, but they do have things like adult bookstores. Which are a lower risk. In terms of crime, they're lower risk. Then we looked at the city of Boulder. In Boulder, on Pearl Street Mall, there's a strip club, the Nitro Club. It's been there forever. And apparently everybody at the university knows about it. So you go, so you look on Pearl Street Mall at the Nitro Club, and they do have, they've got, those time, place, and ordinances. You can't see in. It doesn't look anything different from any other business on Pearl Street. There are secondary impacts that occur around, mostly around disorder type offenses like public intoxication, fighting, criminal mischief, higher level crime they don't see very often. So that's one place where it's right smack in the middle of a tourist site. So, but it varies, but most are actually really in industrial zones.
Thank you.
Mhm. I guess my question is about recommendations. I think they sound great, and it sounds like they would be in stages. So I don't know if this is a question for you or a question for county manager, but it sounds like the community meeting to get accurate information out and do that jointly with Central City if they're willing would be great, just to kind of correct potential misinformation that you discovered or that any of us might be hearing. And then start data capture of some sort in the sheriff's office and the victim services and the patrol specifically. And then later, that might help inform the IGA negotiation down the road. You recommended like 2026 if indeed a SOB were to open. And then if more than one should open in the future, just keep renegotiating every year and looking at the data. But we really need the data to make any conclusions, which is difficult. Do you think those are, what do you think of those
Well,
recommendations?
I think it's important that we do that as well,
Mhm.
because we need to know what we're facing. And everything, and human trafficking is a very, very difficult, very difficult crime to identify.
Yeah.
Education, in which Shelley has done, and Chief
Mhm.
Moriarty and Blackhawk has done with our partners in our
Mhm.
casinos has been huge. And we
Mhm.
support that from the sheriff's office perspective. We also, it's ongoing training. Some of these casinos have done their own training with the to identify human trafficking, because it's not something that's going to hit you in the face as a law enforcement officer walking into a business. It's going to be that person who is cleaning a room, that person who is in valet. It's going to be a different type of people that are going to be able to bring that forward and feel comfortable enough to bring it forward,
Mhm.
that we can start to do that investigation.
Mhm.
The thing about misleading information, I think, is extremely important, is to understand what that misleading information is. What are those issues? And what is being said in our community amongst the SOBs, and so that we can actually give factual information at a public meeting.
Mhm.
We need to know what those issues and concerns are, especially if it's misinformation, like the 2-hour hotel
Mhm. Mhm.
type thing. Is what else out there that we need to know about so that we can address appropriately.
Well, and that's where I think it'd be important, and we do, because I know for ourselves, we haven't really received any clear business models from either the city or RCI, just a lot of, kind of, well, maybe we're looking at this or different things. So that would be helpful, I think, to us in terms of being able to make decisions, and as well as keeping the public informed, that we do have clarification from those entities as to what their business plans and models are. Because, because if we're not clear, that does make it hard when we have residents contact us or making comments or having questions, when we haven't really, I don't feel like I've received a lot of clear information as far as what their plans are. So that would be helpful, I think, all around to have that information.
I agree with you 100%, because anytime you have a business that just says SOBs coming to Central City, but you don't know what that business model is going to be like,
Mhm.
then you're going to have people who are going to speculate and make their own minds up about what these such SOBs are going to be in the community.
And I
So I
think,
think it's extremely, I'm sorry,
sorry.
but I think it's extremely important that RCI help us, help them in this process if that, because it sounds like freedom of speech and stuff like that, that we have to address. And we can't keep it from coming into the community. We can put ordinances in place or regulations in place to help manage it to our best needs.
Right.
When you're talking about your relationship with Chief Moriarty and Black Hawk and victims, sexual crimes, Gilpin County is responsible for policing Central City. What kind of communication are you getting from the businesses or the local government in Central City with those types of crimes? Are they forthcoming, or they are aware of them? They're relying on your staff to do that. Are they supporting you? How are they supporting you? The Central City businesses and government.
Yes. To answer your question, the training that is being given to those important people who are going to identify human trafficking issues are giving both to Blackhawk and Central City. So it's a collaborative effort. It is not just Blackhawk doing it. It's a collaborative effort between Central City and Blackhawk. So when that information then is brought to our attention, then we can open up an investigation into it.
Okay. Because you were just saying Black Hawk, and I was thinking, how is that working with Central City? And then actually they're very much involved in
Oh,
the
absolutely.
training.
Yeah, it's a collaborative effort between both law enforcement agencies and all the motels and all the casinos. Yeah, because it's not just restrictive to just the motels. It's also has it in the casinos as well. So we're trying to educate everybody. And as you well know, it has to be an ongoing on training, because in that industry, there's a lot of turnover. So through that turnover, there's constant training that is going on and has not ceased.
I'm glad you raised that training. They had one that was open to the public, and I attended, and it was fascinating and really eye-opening. But I was really, really impressed. We had little small group discussions. I was really impressed with the people that worked in casinos, of how willing and already informed they were, because they were saying, oh, we see this, we see that. And they already have an eye for what to watch for, which are things I never would have thought of, like someone taking food off it, going around taking food off other people's plates after they left, is an indication that they're not being well fed, and just little things they knew to watch for. So I was really impressed with the casino people, and there were people that attended from the community, including Clear Creek School. There was a woman from the school because she wanted to help, relay the information. So I was encouraging people to attend that training when it's open to the public. I think it's really great too, because we're all eyes and ears for our community. Yeah.
And the training has to be continuously updated,
Yeah.
because as soon as you identify a procedure or process that they go through, they change their tactics. So we need to be constantly educating ourselves, educating our community, educating our casinos and our hotels on the new tactics that come available to us. And we have a network outside of Gilpin County, whether it's in Colorado or in the United States, on human trafficking as well, that we stay in contact with and keep up on the training and everything through them as well, which is extremely important, because it's not just a Gilpin County issue, it's a United States issue.
Yeah.
It's a worldwide issue, I'm sorry.
I wanted to mention too that you mentioned about updating zoning. So our community development is drafting recommendations that they're going to be bringing to us for approval because they're updating a lot of the sections in the zoning codes. And so they're looking at word crafting, how that would be. And I know that Manager Rears is overseeing that. So it's already in process, which is good. Yeah.
And that's a consideration as well for the county.
Yeah.
Make sure we have the most viable language too as well for all of that. And this is great. I think it offers us a start that we can go ahead and utilize as a county to start looking at these things. And I think it's important that we're proactive and not waiting till we've already got things that we have to be running to catch up with. So this reports, I think, has been very helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
I know I've gone over it a couple times and each time
Mhm.
found some new information.
Right.
It's kind of stood out.
One thing, on some of the discussions on the zoning is that the initial attempt is right now to do all the zoning issues at one time, but it'd be nice if we could carve out just the SOP zoning issue so that we're upfront with that and don't have to wait until all of our updates for zoning comes around. I just don't think we should wait for that, but if we can, I know that's being discussed with community development. Because it could happen anytime. Right now, we don't have it. It could happen at any time where someone might come in and want to have a business in Gilpin County.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
Mhm. Okay.
Great. Well,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate
Yeah.
all your work
Thank
and
you.
the information you've given to us. A great start.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It really is a start. I'm going to take your suggestion. And for manager readers, I have a suggestion from the commissioner to do another edit before the studies rules. Commissioner Hollis. So we'll edit again and won't change content. Content will be the same. It'll be a copy edit and I'll give that to you.
Great.
If that's acceptable to everyone.
Sure.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And when we get the final version, we'll put that on the website, so anyone will be able to review it.
Where do you think
Will
you
there
might
be any
host it?
Resolution for approval or is this going to go on the website?
This is just informational. No action is needed.
Where do you think you might host it on the website?
Probably under the commissioner page
Okay,
would be logical location.
not community development.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
They're aware of it. We'll send the final version
Thank
to them
you.
directly. Yep.
Next, we'll go on to resolution 24-156, approving the law enforcement academy repayment agreements. And sorry.
Good morning again.
Morning.
Before you is the standard contract that we have with both Lakewood and Jefferson County Combined Law Enforcement Academy. We started this probably 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, of hiring detention officers. And in hiring those detention officers, they come in non-sworn. So what we're doing is paying for their way to the academy. And by that, they become post-certified and are eligible to come onto the street or to even take on supervisory roles within the sheriff's office. So this agreement is just to continue that funding for for next year for Law Enforcement Academy and for us to send detention officers there to get post-certified. It's been a very successful program.
Yeah.
As we've gone through this. As you can see, we've only lost 2 here recently as a result of this. After they signed that contract of 2 years. And both of them were in violation of that 2 years, and we're working with HR
Yeah.
on that.
Out of a total of how many you've gone through?
9.
We just had 3 graduate in June. We had
Says-
2 that will graduate December.
Yeah.
We had, I believe 3 or 4 in 2023. So we've had probably 8 or 9
Says 9.
total.
It says 9 on here.
And it says 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Again, I just
Good.
got this morning.
So,
Being gone for vacation, so I apologize. I got really,
so losing 2 out of 9 is a good, I'm pretty sure that those are the 9 that we retained, right?
there's 9 of them and 2 of them have decided to leave. They went to RTD. But we are keeping, it's been a great home growth for us. We're finding candidates that actually live and are citizens of Gilpin County that are also applying for the non-certified positions, knowing that we could send them to the academy so they could even start their own career in law
That's
enforcement.
great.
Been a very successful program.
Maybe in the future, you'll get more funding for this type of thing too, with the
Yeah.
measure that just
I
passed.
have a meeting.
Yeah.
It's a virtual meeting on Thursday with the governor
Mhm,
to discuss the ballot emission.
Mhm.
If the 335 million, if
right,
it just passed and how we were going to use that.
yeah.
And everything, and then try and get on that as well.
Is
Yeah,
that,
good.
you're on that group, or is that a group of sheriffs that are going to meet? with the governor?
It's a group of sheriffs that are being part of that, and county sheriffs of Colorado. I'm on the board of directors, and so I plan on being on that.
Good luck in getting some funding that you need.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, and any other questions or comments? Entertain a motion. then?
We have,
It's Marie's turn.
Marie?
okay. Make sure I have the right resolution number. I'll just read it off here then. Madam Chair, I make a motion to adopt resolution 24-156, approving the Law Enforcement Academy repayment agreements with the Sheriff Armstrong presenting.
I second.
Okay, having a motion in a second, all in favor?
Aye.
And resolution 24-156 is adopted.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
And now we'll move on to resolution 24-148, authorizing the execution of real property lease agreement with Gilpin Mountain Kids Early Learning Center. Sarah Paycheck, a paralegal, and Lindsay, a board member of Gilpin Mountain Early Kids Learning.
Good morning, commissioners. So a little background, since the closure of Eagles Nest Early Learning Center, Gilpin County residents have felt the significant impact of the lack of early learning centers for their children in the county. The board does desire to lease the child care facilities located at 10655 Highway 119 in Blackhawk to Mountain Kids Early Learning Center. They're a nonprofit corporation in hopes to fill the absence of an early learning center in Gilpin County. The basics of this is Mountain Kids annual lease amount will be for $1 per year, in addition to the annual reimbursement to the county for the cost of the CAP insurance coverage. And that lease term will be from December 1st of 2024 through November 30th of 2039. That's a 15-year lease, and that's what we did with the previous tenant. Do you have any questions or?
Well, let me just add
Yeah.
for context. Essentially, the lease was very firm with the former organization, Eagles Nest, and so we used that model to create a new lease, just adding in that the insurance for the building would be borne by the county, since it was difficult for Eagles Nest to have that, and then they would just reimburse us for that expense later on. That was a sticking point with Eagles Nest, but essentially the terms are very similar, and an exciting next step for early childcare in Gilpin County.
I noticed that some additional information was provided with this lease that we didn't have on the other one, or if we did, I don't remember saying it. It was a lot of discussion about the water rights and the relationship there. And I was just wondering if you could just kind of give a brief explanation of that.
So
I don't know, the last presentation.
it wasn't really shared previously, but it really was in order to build the school and have the early child care center, there needed to be water rights. And there was a process involved where the county received, or the school received, the water rights for both the school and for the childcare center. So it was for context, historical
So
context.
just for background, then the water rights were ceded from Central City to
The school,
the school.
correct.
And the school ceded them to Eagles Nest.
Yes,
Okay,
essentially,
so the
in part.
part, so Gilpin County has no responsibility or relationship with the water rights.
Well, we do, go ahead.
So the idea is that they were deeded from Central to RE1 with the intended purpose of an early learning child center. So the tenant has the same obligations underneath that lease as the previous tenant, but the Gilpin County doesn't own those rights. RE1 does, and they're essentially leasing them out for the use of this child care center.
So we have no obligation or responsibility as far as water rights with the Mountain Kids.
Correct.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
wondering, because this is new, it wasn't in the previous presentation. I just want to understand.
Right. Yeah. So we're kind of like facilitating connecting the dots together so that they get utilized, but they're RE1s.
Okay. That was my only question.
Okay, I have 6, they're short. So on the land lease on page 1, it's saying that is there an office for the Mountain Kids? There's just a line that says with offices at blank. Is there going to be an office for Mountain Kids nonprofit or?
No, it'll
No.
just be at the building.
Okay, there.
Essentially.
Okay. And then let's see, on page 2. I just had a question on item 4. It's talking about that other uses may be permitted upon review and written approval. But I couldn't think of what that might even be. Like what other use would there be besides the childcare?
Again, we use the original lease as the framework for this. So that language was in the existing lease.
Is that the way we want it then?
I mean, it's up to the commissioners and Mountain Kids. I don't know, maybe if, I don't know, after school programs, outside programs. I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head. But typically, we're just trying to outline the fact that they have to follow the uses that we're giving them, and that if they want to do anything additional, that approval needs to come through the county.
Sure.
So even though I can't provide an example, it's just in the event that they can, that they have to get approval
I
through
thought it would
us.
be kid oriented.
Yeah.
Or parents.
Well, if
Um,
something that comes to mind is La Leche League or something like that, that you could have classes or things like that. Would that be considered not necessarily daycare, but, family oriented? I'm just wondering that type of thing.
Parenting classes.
Parenting
maybe,
classes.
right, and that would be something that's a little different, but allowable because it's within the scope.
So I can't think of anything. That
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. And then on page 3, number 9, I just wanted I didn't know if that was new, but I was really glad to see that because of
That was new.
thank you. Because of the problem that happened that kind of led to their demise, I think.
Yeah.
The loan that they took out. Thank you.
Encumbering the property.
And then on page 5, I just want to point out in section 13, there are a number of typos, but I can show those to you later. Or if you want to run
Section 13.
13, yeah, the A through J,
Right, there are typos in there.
yeah. But you can find them, or I can point them out. Page 6, number 16. I was wondering the way that it's worded too, and maybe this is just because it was, the county shall have the right to enter and inspect the property. Wouldn't that just be facilities, or maybe it would be certain people, wouldn't just be the county?
Yeah, the county's used as a vague term. It would obviously be officers, agents, and employees of the county.
Yeah,
Um,
but only certain ones even. Like,
Right, yeah, I mean, it just wouldn't be a free for all county staff to go over there whenever they want type of situation. But yeah, again, it's more so related to upkeep, maintenance, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Also typical rights granted to most landlords.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're okay with the wording. And then page 8. So on number 24, it talks about customers. So does customers, that includes the children and the families, because the children and the families aren't mentioned in there as far as safety, but implied, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's essentially what the terms of the customers are. I mean, I'm open to other verbiage if you would prefer.
I didn't know if you specifically want to say children and families, but if customers is meant to be all encompassing, then that's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm okay with it if you are. I think it encompasses it because they do have to exchange fees for the
Right.
services, so.
Right. Yep. Okay, that's all. I
Okay.
told you they weren't too bad.
And I'll flag 13 and we'll connect afterwards and get that all straightened out.
This was the version that we,
Our nonprofit, not LLCs with Gilpin.
and that we
the-
revised and sent back.
I have a question for Lindsay, and just for, I know in your bylaws, we reviewed the bylaws as well, as far as how much supervision the commissioners have, or how much participation commissioners have on the board. And I don't remember what it said, so I was asking you, do you remember what it said, this most recent bylaws?
Mostly what it says is just it requires a county representative, so whatever capacity that is appointed by the commissioners. So it can be a commissioner. Right now, it's Janie Barker, our Human Services
Mhm.
Director. I don't think there's any parameters on who it would be. It's just that it is appointed by the Board of County
I guess
Commissioners.
we've had this sort of out of the scope of this lease, but the conversation of what happened with the, with Eagles Nest, there was a board, a commissioner on the board through that
Not-
time, and, or at least commissioners that attended, and the commissioners were not aware of what was going on in there, so hopefully with having a commissioner or county personnel on there, we can be informed of any expenditures or things like that are going on.
Yes.
But I just, if that's sufficient, I guess.
So that was the intention of exactly the recreated bylaws and the new organization, Mountain Kids, is that the county would have more of an active involvement with the operation of the new childcare organizations. Before, a county commissioner would attend on occasion, more of an invited person to attend, and now they're going to be involved in the finances and the inner workings of the operation, whoever is the designee. As mentioned, it's the Human Services Director, and that was envisioned in the.
She would have, because she has more experience with that and have a better understanding of the operations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll just
and-
clarify too that in the past, they weren't on the board. Now we'll have someone on the board, which is different. And so they'll be in the board meetings, and also the misinformation. I think the county was not informed because the reports they were given from the bookkeeper were not accurate, but they were taken to be truthful by the person there attending the meetings. So they were misled.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
right.
know
Yeah.
background on that. I was just trying to say of how we're
Right,
going to
and
address
we
it
had
going forward.
strengthened, and with the board's help, strengthened the bylaws and the requirements to keep an active board as
Right,
well.
Right, yeah. So I think it'll be good to have someone on the board. Well,
And I don't know her exact when the terms that I think we do have, I don't know if we actually have term limits. I'd have to double check on the bylaws, but I think she's just appointed indefinitely until you would appoint somebody else or. if she
Well,
would
and
leave
we
or something.
reappoint annually for the board. So
Maybe.
our representative for the county would be an annual,
Okay.
either reappointment or change
Yeah.
that would come up. But okay, any other questions or comments?
yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready for a motion?
You're ready.
All right. Madam Chair, I move that we adopt Resolution 24-148 This is authorizing the execution of real property lease agreement with Mountain Kids Early Learning Center for a cost of $1 per year. And this is through November 30th of 2039.
A second?
Okay, having the motion in a second, all in favor?
Aye.
And resolution 24-148 has been adopted. Good, congratulations.
Thanks for all your work.
Yeah.
Do you have a timeline schedule when you hope to?
Well, that'll kind of lead us to the next
Oh, next
next
one?
resolution.
I'll ask that.
24-147, a request to award funds for the child care to Gilpin Mountain Kids Early Learning Center.
So I can start if you don't mind, but the commissioners have allocated 100,000 for childcare for this year. Obviously, that has not been spent. And so there's still 100,000 in the budget this year. So having conversations with Mountain Kids, they're wanting some seed money to start off hiring a director, cleaning up the building, some sort of maintenance and repairs of the building, since it's been essentially vacant for a year. And so their request is for 100,000. My comment back is, what are they going to spend the money on? I'm sure that's a shared question that the commissioners have, given the
Absolutely.
history. And so I think that's where Lindsay is here to address.
So you have an itemized list.
Yes, I have a budget here, and then I have like some scenarios, because basically when the board of directors met, it was like, well, the commissioners have budgeted 100,000, might as well ask and have that conversation and see how that goes, because we know that that money is going to be put to use. It might not be in 2024, but that money is going to be going towards building expenses, hiring a director, and then all the different insurances that are needed, which I will say with that, the change in the lease with the reimbursement for the building insurance, we're still not sure of what that quote is, so we don't even know exactly how much that amount is. I think we budgeted, I think in here 30, but I'm not sure exactly. And that includes different insurances. It's not just that specific insurance, but with the terms of the lease, that first payment is due at the end of January. So knowing that that money will be kind of coming back in a sense.
Do you have a breakout of the budget you can
Yeah.
share with the
I'm
board?
gonna to you right now. And this has both in the revenue, 100,000 for 2024 and 100,000 for 2025. If you want them to. I apologize, I didn't get this to you sooner. Should have had a similar budget with the application for the community funding for 2025. But there were some updates. The capital outlay is going to be one of the big ones, is that, and who knows what else once we get in there and kind of assess the building after a year of being vacant, what else is needed. But we know for sure that they have a geothermal heating system, and so that water heater is needing to be replaced, and it could be upwards of $30,000 to $35,000. Not entirely sure until we're get in the building and make those big assessments, but there are some major expenses coming very soon after operations are beginning. We haven't heard back from the IRS yet, but they told us at the beginning of June when we submitted that if we don't hear from them in 6 months, to contact them. So we are about a little less than a month until we can really start hounding the IRS to be like, where's our application? Because they're not going to let us do it before then. So the status still just says it's accepted and it's in process. So
It's
that's
my
where that
understanding
stands
that
right
we
now.
weren't going to submit the lease until you did get your nonprofit status. Is that switched? We decided to go ahead with.
So they still have the nonprofit status in the state of Colorado, just not federally. So they are recognized as a nonprofit.
Corporation in Colorado, but federally, we're not a 501c3 quite yet.
And the idea is that, as mentioned, that there's still a lot of work to do, and they want to try and get started before they have that agreement. So at least they've taken advantage of this time between now and when they get confirmation from the IRS that they're recognized federally.
We don't anticipate there to be really any issues with that as far as I can tell, but.
Do you have a breakdown of the? Do you have a breakdown of the requested $100,000 specifically? Because this is like the overall budget. Like, do you know how much a director might be, for example?
Well, for like the first 3 months, say of a director's salary would be just under 20,000, depending on what we officially decide what their salary, but according to what we've budgeted, it's about 18,200 for 3 months of salary.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't include insurance or anything like that.
Do you have
So,
other?
the salary and then the water heater, I said 30 to 35, depending on how much that would be. The insurance, we're still waiting on coming back. Could be, I don't know. We're really unsure about that with the insurance, but that'll be one payment that's due
Right.
fairly soon. I did, with the budget, if you did 75,000, that would leave us a ending surplus of just about 8,000. So if it wasn't the full 100, it would at least not have us be negative. And if it was 50, it would put us at almost negative 18,000. And that obviously salaries, that includes a whole year of salaries and everything for employees and everything like that. But just knowing that getting us through to next year, that that money is going to go to good use.
Well, and I know the IRS is, that final approval really will have effect on what grants and all you can apply for. Because that is their one base requirement that you have that.
Do you know when, you might have already said this, but when do you think you're going to start taking applications to be open? Are you thinking next spring or earlier?
For like having students,
Yeah.
we have a waiting list already. So we have a running waiting list for kids, but we haven't had any applications, mostly because we don't have a director to, hey, this is what we need on our application. So we're kind of in that process of once we hire a director, a lot of these, like the license itself, applying for CCAP and applying for all of those, even getting some of those grants started. I think will be a lot of what the executive director will get started.
So is that kind of step one is, or concurrently, the three things you mentioned, the salary, the heater assessment, and then.
And any other assessment if
insurance.
we need to, I think we'd need to, I think in the lease, it said something about an approved general contractor or something along those lines of giving it to the county or something, but having some kind of contractor to assess the building to see what's going on.
Have you had a chance to go in and inventory the chairs and tables and the supplies? Not yet.
No, now that we have the lease, we can go in and do that. I know there's quite a bit, obviously still left in there, and I don't know if there's any still stuff going on with the items in the building as far as the bank. I think we're all set there, so.
Is that considered up with the Small Business Association?
Yeah, as far as I know, we run the traps that we need to do with the state, and everything that's in there is the county's.
So does there need to be anything from the county to give that to police or how does that work?
Yeah, I would think if once you're in there and you have an inventory of what you might like, then maybe we could convey that via bill of sale. Just so you would have it. And then we would figure out how to dispose of the things that we don't need.
Make it officially yours for the.
And depending on the value, that can be done administratively or formally to the board. We'll have to quantify that.
Have you had much interest from people interested in being the director of the program? I've seen a few that were sent to the commissioners and forward them to you, but.
Yes, we do have a person that has been interested pretty much since the beginning to be the director. Obviously, we'll have a fair and equitable hiring process, but she has been pretty instrumental even with the steering committee on getting things done. We didn't feel like her being on the board would necessarily be good and then trying to be the director. So the board has been made and then we'll make those decisions, but we'll obviously put out an advertisement and everything, but we are having somebody interested. And then I've also had several people that are interested in being teachers too and asking about when we just start hiring for that. So that's good news that there's people that are wanting to be hired for that.
I also know during the timeframe when we had public input and different public meetings that you had, there was a group, or at least I think also included Janie Barker, of having training people to become in-house daycare facilities and promoting that. I don't know if that's still something that I know, I think that's something Janie is still working on, but not necessarily part of the Mountain Kids set.
Yeah, we don't have anything formal, but I think having, we have those volunteers that are on there that are kind of help with those kinds of things. I don't know about the training as far as like getting people to be in home, but just trying to get that word out of like people, you can get training for this, or there is resources for you to become in home. I think there's just too much liability to try to, vouch for people and.
Oh,
or not.
through your organization.
Yeah,
You're just-
for like the in-home anyway,
Right.
but trying to get people resources is definitely something that we want to do, is trying to get more resources to people.
Oh, that's good.
Mhm. Well, and Triad with the Red Rocks Community College is really the main driving force for that and those programs, so.
Yeah, they have a longstanding training program to help people have a small business in home.
Right, so
And
it's,
all the steps they have to go through.
yeah, it's not necessarily anything that we want to get involved with at this time, except just pointing people in the correct direction.
Mhm.
But anyway, so any other questions, getting back to the budget and the request?
We do have 2 more meetings this year. So if we didn't, we haven't had a motion yet. If we didn't do the full amount, then possibly we could do somewhere later as we have a progress report. Because you said you may hear in December about the IRS standing.
At least when we can contact them to then be
Yeah,
like, because they were like,
nudge
you
'em.
don't hear from us in 6 months, then contact us. So we have until I think like December 12th, I think is what the date is.
So, Commissioner Hollingsworth, are you suggesting that we wait to get more details on the Gilpin Mountain Kids budget before we make a decision on the funds?
Not necessarily. I was just saying if we decide between the 3 of us not to do the full 100,000, but maybe to do it was suggested 75,000 could cover these 3 items: the salary, the hiring, the heater if needed, and the insurance as a starting point. 'Cause some of these others will be needs once you open, supplies and things. Unless you think you can rally for more.
I was just trying to give you a couple scenarios of what,
Yeah.
75 would be. I mean, 100 would be wonderful, and that's what was budgeted, so that's why we might as well make that ask, but understanding that it might not be entirely realistic, and we are getting to the end of the year, but just know that it will go to good use, that's for sure. And just saying one other thing on the budget here, not next year, I think we have to be in business for 2 years to be eligible for the DOLA funds, the impact funds. Is
I
that
don't
correct?
know if it's correct. Year 1, you have to have data.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that was coming, at some point, hopefully in the future, that would be another funding source. But right now, it's not anything that we,
Yeah.
could
It,
get.
it kind of works out to 2 years because you have to have 1 full year of information and then you apply
For the
the
next year.
following year. So it does work out to about 2 years that go by before you're eligible to.
But I think you just need a year of data.
Well, I know we have talked ever since you started looking at another daycare facility, commissioners have committed to supporting you, supporting your efforts. So if without further ado, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution, is this right this time? Resolution 24-147, request to award funds for childcare to Gilpin County Mountain Kids Early Learning Center of $100,000 in 2024.
Now second.
Okay, having the motion in the second, all in favor?
Aye.
And congratulations, 24-147 is adopted 3-0. You have the full amount and
We'll look
good
forward
luck,
to
yeah.
reports.
Yes.
Of
yeah,
course.
Many reports to come. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, and now we'll move on to resolution 24-144, authorizing the execution of real property lease agreement with the Gilpin Ambulance Authority.
I wasn't sure if Cody was going to be able to make it, so I might be flying.
Oh,
So, our current lease with Gilpin Ambulance Authority is set to term as of December 31st of this year. If you remember, we've just been doing annual leases. So this year we decided to bump it to 3 years so that we don't have to do it every year. Also, it's in line with our contract policy allowing the term to be 3 years. This is a very similar lease to the one that we've had previously with Gilpin Ambulance Authority. The only difference that you'll note is that we've added a 5% escalator for each year. So that amount will increase by 5% every year in the term. So the first term starting will be for $52,500. That's a 5% increase on last year's $50,000 annual lease. And then it'll, like I said, every year it'll increase by 5%. The only other difference in this lease than our previous arrangement would be that we are now requesting that Gilpin Ambulance Authority reimburse the county for 50% of the internet costs for the Apex Emergency Services building.
And the only thing I'll add is Timberline also leases out their building. They went to the GAA board. Same terms, 3 years, 5% escalation each year. And I shared prior to voting that the county would be following suit, and the GAA board is expecting this.
I believe we've discussed this at a work session prior as well. Are there any other questions regarding the lease?
No, she answered my question about the 3-year. That is. You ready for motion then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a question on the 5%.
Sure.
How was that determined?
Timberline is the one that requested the 5% for their rental. And so we're following suit with Timberline's 5%.
It's also pretty close with the consumer price index right now. So some standard contract language that I've seen before is it'll increase based on the average of the consumer price index. So 5% as of right now is right in that ballpark. I'm going to guess that's kind of where Timberline picked that number from. But
So is that the intention in the future is kind of do what Timberline's doing, or Timberline's going to do what we're doing type of thing?
It just seems fair. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt resolution 24-144. This is authorizing the execution of real property lease agreement with Gilpin Ambulance Authority for a period of 3 years.
I second.
Okay, having the motion in the second, all in favor? Aye. And resolution 24-144 is adopted through this.
thank you,
Thank you.
commissioners.
Thank you. Now we'll have resolution 24-146, the 2025 Planning Commission appointments. We have Rob Gutierrez, the Community Development Director.
Good morning, commissioners. bringing before you a resolution for appointments to the planning commission. We did it a little differently than we have in the past. We did not submit these applicants to the planning commission, so I don't have a recommendation. We did not conduct interviews. I just thought I'd bring you the names of everybody that we received that had interest in those that are reapplying and those that wish to submit, and then see what the board would like to do.
And how many positions again are we? 3?
It would be 3. The current members that are expiring would be Jeffrey Green, Sean Dow, and Melissa Harless. And then Sean Dow was appointed last January or this January to fill the remainder of this term, and the other 2 have served full terms.
I have a question why you want to do it this way. I think that I know every time this comes up, I like to hear from the planning commission because I think they interview for diversity of expertise and also somewhat where people live in the county, but also kind of fit with conversation style, that kind of thing. Are you thinking they just would prefer to reappoint the 3 existing because they're working well together?
Typically, the commission has always recommended reappointment for the existing members unless there was a reason that the performance was not good. The rules of procedure, what they're called, planning commission rules of procedure. Sorry, I'm thinking of other names for planning commission rules. They say that the planning commission may conduct interview of the applicants if the board chooses that you want the planning commission to do that. So I think just based on feedback that, you know, I got last time, there was just some concern about, you know, it coming to the board with recommendations and not the board not necessarily being able to decide how they wanted the process to go. So I was like, I'll just bring it to you this time and then you can let me know what you prefer.
I did notice that there was one of the new applicants that expressed interest in the historic
Preservation.
preservation.
Yeah.
Is there still a vacancy there?
Yes,
So that's an opportunity.
absolutely.
Hmm. So my preference since is that the planning commission would bring a recommendation. I think they're better equipped to talk to people and see, you know, what a new person might bring to them. And it also seems unfortunate the person applying didn't get an opportunity to even have a conversation. That's just my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the thing is too, to understand is like what is going to come back is probably recommendations for reappointment of the 3 and then positive or recommendations on those that applied. So we could do that if the board chooses.
Yeah, I have a preference for that as well. Just having served on a board myself, it's always nice that the board gets to interview and talk with those applying or reapplying. And then also, just because I think they have a better feel for how they're working together as well as what types of things that they're currently working on as well.
Okay. Then maybe we could continue to December 17th. And I can return to you with the recommendations from the planning commission.
Who would have a conversation with Mr. Slauson about the historic preservation?
Oh, we'll do that. And then we can probably bring that as well. We didn't get any others, but if you know anybody, if you could give us some names, we may give them a call and say, hey, you know, we need some volunteers here. And then we can maybe also bring a separate resolution for that on the 17th.
And how many positions are open for the historic preservation?
I believe we have 2.
So we have 2.
Yeah.
as well.
Well, that'll be handled differently at a different time, and this is just, we're gonna be doing both of them at the same time, start preservation.
We could bring a resolution on the 17th for historic preservation. It'd be a separate one.
So then we'll need a motion to table resolution 24 -146 to our next meeting.
December 17th, so
December
that's the next one,
17th.
but
So I'll be asking for a motion to table the resolution until December 17th.
Table or postpone?
Postpone.
Or postpone,
Okay.
either.
All right, thank you. All righty. And at that time, we're going to have both the historic preservation and the planning commission recommendations.
Maybe.
Well, definitely the planning commission, and we'll see with the, about the historic.
Okay. Madam Chair, I make a motion to postpone resolution 24-146, 2025 Planning Commission appointments until
December 17th.
December 17th, 2024, in these chambers. Okay.
I second.
Okay, having the motion and a second to postpone, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so the postponement was adopted 3-0, and we'll go ahead and review this again on December 17th.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Guidance on that.
And then we'll go on to Resolution 24-151, approving an amendment to the platted building envelope for Lot 16 in Roosevelt Ridge subdivision.
Yeah, so commissioners, this is a resolution proposing a building envelope move in Roosevelt Ridge, which we looked at a building envelope move there in the last month. This is a different lot and a different property owner. It's lot 16. He's moving it 300 feet to the northwest of its original position. He's gotten approval from HOA as well as his neighbors for this move. The move will overall reduce the elevation of his proposed building structure. He also has provided photographs of the view from the proposed envelope and its low visibility from its surrounding areas. For similar reasons to the last building envelope move, we do recommend approval of this. It is not going to impact views from 119 or neighboring properties and will not impact any environmental concerns in the area. Yeah, that's the basic overall summation of it. What questions do you have for us?
Have you received any input from the surrounding property owners?
Yes, we've received, basically letter of support and approval from the HOA and I believe the neighbor across the street. We didn't have anybody have any issues with it.
So the last version
don't
went
have
through a public
those.
hearing. Public hearing is not required. So this is not subject to a public hearing.
We didn't have those in our packet. There's only mention of and the HOA is 3 members and this person is one of them. So only 2 people voted on that. But we don't have anything showing that, and we don't have any letters from neighbors. So I did have the same questions. There's the adjacent neighbors it says that they approved it. And then there's nothing from the across the street neighbors. And then I was wondering, it's moving it closer to the BLM land. Do you know what the separation is from the BLM property to their property?
Just had the survey, but then I was looking for what I was supposed to.
I'm asking that in part because, BLM allows certain activities, including hunting. And so I don't know if they're aware that someone could be hunting close by if they move really close to the BLM. Or if that.
The home
bothers-
itself,
Yeah,
why would the location of the home affect hunting?
it doesn't. I'm just wondering if they're aware that someone could be hunting close to them
Oh,
on the BLM property, because it's the next property adjacent,
yeah.
or other
I just don't know if
activities.
that's how that's connected to the moving of the envelope.
Because you have to be so far, for hunting, you have to be so far from a structure to hunt.
Right,
So
but that
I'm
would be
just
on
wondering,
people that are on BLM land.
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just wondering if there is that separation there. Like, why push it closer? Just a question I have. Yeah.
Because it's getting pushed closer to the.
And the email from the HOA was in the packet. page 201 on the,
We have just something saying. Yeah,
Dear Lurie.
it just says that they approved it. So that's all there is?
yeah.
And so,
They sent us that.
but their HOA is only 3 members? And
I
the
don't really know the details of the structure of it,
and the applicant is one of the
but there's only a
3.
few people that live in that subdivision.
Yeah.
Still quite a bit of vacant lots.
I'm kind of asking because I know this came up in our previous one about this was all set up in 2005,
Mhm.
and now our current people are going to be asking to change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem with making changes to the building envelopes as long as they're consistent with the conditions of approval.
Right?
I mean, they were done in 2005, you know, by people kind of walking the property. It's kind of a challenging property to, we know when we're there on the ground, because we did go out and visit this one. It's kind of a challenging property to assess at the ground level. It's honestly from maybe like drone footage and photography, it'd be better. So, I mean, as long as the building envelope moves are consistent with the conditions that were set out, I don't see a problem with doing that for property owners. Because obviously how they want to use, I mean, we have the conservation easement over the areas outside of the envelope. And I don't, as long as that movement is not negatively impacting the conservation overall, I don't see a problem.
And it's keeping the visibility low.
Yeah, and this site
Mm.
is a bit, this site is a bit lower in
Mm.
elevation than the original. And they did do a test, they put up like a thing of balloons, just see if the neighbors would see at the maximum height, and they really couldn't see them over the tree line, so.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing with this subdivision that may be challenging in the future is the brush is, like the forest is decently thick there. So fire mitigation, particularly in the envelope, may increase visibility a bit when people do that, but that's gonna be kind of something the property owners are gonna have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, the photos that we received show a lot of mitigation needs.
Yeah, it's pretty
Right.
thick forest.
So do you have something from the other neighbors?
I don't think I have anything else. I thought there was,
It shows
I
that
thought I corresponded with one of the neighbors, but I'd have to-
not all. I mean, it's moving further away from the others, but it's always just nice to know that people are being neighborly that way.
yeah.
Is there notification put up that they're requesting this?
We didn't notify since it wasn't required, like, we didn't require public hearing, but I did one on the last one because I knew that an adjoining neighbor was upset and I wanted to make sure that they had
Right.
the opportunity to voice their concerns on the record. But with this one, we basically have US Forest Service, that one lot with Gilpin Gardens, and then lot 17.
You did contact them, you said? or you-
No, I did not, no.
And 15, lot 15.
Oh, yeah, across the road.
Yeah, I would suggest that you do that and let them get some input from them or no response and then can move forward. I mean, it's just not showing where the other circle is on the other properties. So we don't really know how they're affecting those. At least it's not shown in this drawing that you provided us.
We had there's 16 and it shows 15 and 17 BLM and then the one in Gilpin Gardens.
I think she was talking about the platted building envelopes,
Yes.
which some of them I think are on the original plat that was included, the final plat, which is like the last page of this.
Yeah, we have that diagram.
Right. I mean, I guess the main, just, circle back in with the guidance that we received from the county attorney was, I mean, they were the position that these lots, building lot envelopes can be determined by community development as long as they're consistent with those provisions. And as long as they're consistent, I feel confident with you moving forward. And since public hearings not required, notification not required, and we didn't see any concern moving forward.
And let me just add to that really the board have already given the authority to shift the building envelope to the community development director. So administratively, he can adjust the building envelope, but just to make sure that everyone's aware of any sort of shift in the building envelope, he's coming before you for this added level of security.
And I think that was the issue with the last one is we had the plat showing it moved, but we didn't have documentation. So I mean, the board resolution, I think, is a great way to have that documentation of the decision that was made and why it was made.
Is 15, lot 15 built or 17 and 15 already built? I mean, you did give us this, which is indicative, just hard to read of where.
No, I want to say no. We can check real quick, but I want to say no on that.
We'll check.
Yeah, well, it looks like with the move that actually puts it further away from
Property line.
the other properties, yeah.
Would they just have their driveway go? Because part of the conservation easement is disturbing as little earth as possible. So they would have to have a longer driveway, it looks like.
Yeah, potentially, unless they move unless they move their entry point. The current driveway is pretty rudimentary, just kind of for basic access. But the lot to the west is 3 Roosevelt Ridge, and there is a home there. And then the lot to the across Roosevelt Ridge, there's no home there at this point. Just on,
So 15 and
Jumping all over.
17, 15 and 17 aren't built yet. They just have the envelope indicated on here.
17 is directly to the west, right?
Mhm.
That one has a home on it. It's just very far from there. It's like
Is
more on the
Is
higher.
it here then?
Yeah, uh-huh.
And they're
It's
the
in
ones
that.
that gave permit.
Yeah, they're
approval.
aware of and John's the property owner of what he wants to do there.
They gave approval, lot 17,
Yeah, because they were the ones they did that balloon test with
right?
because I think their elevation's a bit higher.
Oh, okay, so they would see up above.
Yeah.
And did you hear from or contact the 15?
No, I did not.
Well, it looks like the building envelope for lot 15 is across the road, and they would be physically closer to them now when they move.
Right? That would be further
So
along.
it might be nice to hear from the owners of lot 15 to make sure.
Well, it'll move it further away because it'll move it from here up into this corner. So it'll be further away from where 15's envelope is.
And to a lower elevation, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So less visible and further away.
Sure, I'm looking at the right ones.
And even where the lot envelope now is, like, you can't, when you're driving in on Roosevelt Ridge, you can't, they have like a tower that they built there, just kind of do photography way back. It sits there, you can't see it from Roosevelt Ridge until you get down that driveway.
There's no construction started at all. This is something.
No, it's just a kind of basic driveway and they've got survey stakes.
Where's the driveway on this drawing?
You know where Roosevelt Ridge is coming down at the bottom of the U shape? It kind of starts right after the U's coming back. So I know that's like what's that number on that survey? It's pretty close to the preliminary plat, honestly.
Yeah, if you look at the preliminary plat, it's pretty much right here.
I see it from there.
I have to say something because it was funny. In the write-up, it says it would significantly reduce the highest elevation by 5 feet. And that's about my height. And I was like, I've never had my height referred to as significant. Anyway.
Maybe a little too much of an adjective. Word in that sense.
So you have something, you said you have something from the adjacent neighbors
I might.
letter or something.
I just know that we had a conversation about it and then I thought I saw an email, but I could circle back on that. But again, I don't think the neighbors' positions are necessarily important for making this decision because it's about the criteria that was set out in the original resolution. And part of that criteria is not the opinions of neighbors, but what is the overall impact of the location of the building envelope?
I think it's good to have them given that last the hearing, because there's a lot of he said, she said, no document. So the more you have to substantiate the decision, I think is good. But if you feel like you have something or can get something, that's great.
I think having input from surrounding neighbors from the beginning is a good idea. 'Cause, we have so many occurrences where there wasn't communication and it turns out to be very hostile for the neighbors. And if you can involve them in the initial conversations, I think it's a good
Yeah.
place for them to start.
Well, and also, I mean, I just think if it was approved by the HOA, that means that it was on their agenda and that agenda would go out to all the owners, so they would have been notified that way as well.
We assume, but since
If they
there's
voted on it.
2 people that voted on it, I don't know. And I don't know. I'm not going to dig into their bylaws and everything.
Right, but yeah, so I think up to some point as well, that as long as the owner of the land is following regulations and any stipulations that we have.
I still think it'd be a good idea to contact the one neighbor that you haven't heard from yet, and just to, let them know that this is happening, or, so they're aware of it.
Sounds like that's.
Can we
the
make it
direction.
just conditional? Could I do a motion and just make it conditional that you have a written input from them on file?
Okay.
Because it sounds like you feel like you can get it.
But what if their input is negative?
It's negative.
And then you're going to want to weigh that.
I'll say approval.
Well,
So
my suggestion is, it sounds like the board wants neighborhood input before the decision is made. My recommendation is just to continue this again to December 17th. And then we can send out notices to the adjacent property owners and let them know. So then you will have that information for that pending decision.
My recommendation from staff is just to not do that, because it doesn't matter what those neighbors say. The decision needs to be made on the criteria of the original approval. And this is not a variance. This is an agreement on the land between the county and the property owners. That's what the conservation easement is. And so as long as, so if you were going to move to deny the removal of the building envelope because the neighbor didn't like it, that would not be good grounds to deny. So that's why I understand, like, we like to reach out, but if we're not required to reach out, and if the decision should not be based on that information, but based on the recorded agreement with the county and the conditions of it, that's where my recommendation would come for to make this decision. But I'll support you no matter what you want to do. I just want to make sure you have that full scope.
I think even if the landowner came back and didn't approve of it, I would still approve it. It's just that I want them to be informed. I think it's a good thing for them to be informed, and if it comes in front of the board, your logic there is appropriate, and that it's not up to them to make the decision. It's up to the board and our responsibility. But it's still, I just think, to be neighborly and do things and include your neighbors and things. You can avoid a lot of problems in the future.
But I would say that's up to the individual at this point, and I would be careful of what kind of precedent that we set. If we start saying you have to have the approval and all your neighbors have to have knowledge of everything that goes on your property.
So why did we even reach out to the HOA if this, was really not up to them at all? So the agreement is between the counties and the property owners.
Let me pose a possible solution. If really, Commissioner Morris, your concern is that they need to be notified of this action, the action could move forward, and then staff would just share this resolution after the fact. And so they would be formally notified that the building envelope has been shifted from the existing location to the new location. Would that satisfy? Okay.
They're aware, they're not, and even though if they had an HOA meeting, they may be absent landlords and do not know about it, so.
We can absolutely share the resolution and send it to the neighbors afterwards.
And really, as you're saying, our task is to approve it based on the stipulations from the 2005 subdivision agreement, right?
Yeah.
Which they're meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we will formally notify of the decision and any conditions attached to it.
Okay, thank you.
It'll help cover staff in the future too, if there is a question, I think. Are you ready for?
Yes, I'm ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt resolution 24-151. This is approving an amendment to the platted building envelope for lot 16 in the Roosevelt Ridge subdivision, allowing them to move it 300 feet.
A second?
Okay, having the motion in a second, all in favor of resolution 24-151?
Aye.
And no opposed, so resolution 24-151 has been adopted 3-0.
Thanks for,
Thank you.
Thank you. both.
Thank you.
thanks
Okay,
for entertaining our questions.
And we will send that notice out to the neighboring
Yes.
property owners.
okay. And then we'll move on to resolution 24-150, authorizing the acceptance and contract execution for Charge Ahead Colorado grant.
So a little bit of backstory here. We've worked on this and we were working on it at the end of last year and, then, we applied and I think we spoke with you in a work session and it was budgeted for this year. We got the grant, we started moving ahead and then it became clear. We were like, where's the resolution? Where's the resolution?
Right.
And we couldn't find one. So, we coming back with the resolution just for formal approval so that we can execute this final contract.
Yeah. And everything's moving forward with the.
The United Power
That's
Work
great.
is done. I think some of the charging equipment is here at Public Works and some more will be here tomorrow.
Great.
Okay,
Exciting.
Yeah.
that's great. Okay, so any questions or comments regarding this?
Other than I didn't approve, I voted against this previously. I don't believe the county should be putting EV stations on the highway. There are already 9 EV stations between Ward and Blackhawk and Central City. And I don't believe that that's something we should be doing, especially at the library, at public access, having strangers and people stopping there when we have activities at the library. So I was just letting you know that I didn't approve it the last time, and for those reasons.
Okay,
Do you not want to make the motion then?
I'll make the motion, yes.
Um,
Madam Chair, I make a motion to adopt resolution 24-150, authorizing acceptance and contract execution for a Charge Ahead Colorado grant.
I'll second.
okay, having the motion in a second, all in favor of resolution 24-50?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Nay?
Okay, and the resolution is adopted 2-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
have the resolution 24-152 awarding a contract to all copy products for the lease of a multifunction copier, the maintenance and supply service.
Okay.
An updated resolution for you from the one that was included in your packet. There was an error made with tabulating the do not exceed total cost of the contract.
Okay,
So
Thank
you'll see
you.
those reflected numbers on that resolution. It remains otherwise unchanged. Just one moment here.
mhm.
Okay. Good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
The resolution before you today awards a contract to all copy products for the lease of multifunction copiers across county buildings. Just to give a little bit of background, we had at one point within the county 3 different companies we were working with to lease copiers and provide service and supply for those copiers. It was expected by staff that if we could reduce those under a single contract, we could get better rates. And then also, in pursuant to the BOCC's strategic priority number 3 for financial sustainability, these contracts were due to be put out to bid anyways. So we went ahead and kind of set up our noticing so that we could get everything switched over on a single date and a single contract. Went through our standard procurement process. Through that, we received a number of proposals, I think 9 total, if I remember correctly. And from that, collected a group of evaluators from various county departments. We held interviews with 3 firms, and from those 3 firms, identified a top firm, All Copy Products. All Copy has been the leaser for the sheriff's office for a number of years. Had no complaints from them, no concerns as far as continuing with that, and all other county buildings. So again, just to summarize, this will approve the contract with All Copy Products to provide those copiers with a do not exceed cost of $22,932.48. I did do a little bit of a quick math looking at our previous invoices to see exactly how much the county could expect to save based off of previous years. While with previous programs, we had a number of copies based pricing system. So I basically just took averages of the last 3 months, projected that out for a full year. With that, I got about $32,500 annually on between the 3 previous contracts. And of course, with that new 23,000 figure, saving about almost $10,000 annually. This resolution also, we do not have a final contract with you today. They're still in negotiations on that with the various languages. So this resolution does authorize the county manager to execute that final contract following review by the county attorney, assuming that approximately $23,000 figure is not exceeded. I think that covers everything.
Question on
Yes.
billing. Right now, the invoices come in from the different departments because we had different companies.
Yes.
So the billing is going to be handled from facilities for all the different departments, or it's going to come from finance, or?
It probably will be from finance with the change the board took today of the consolidated billing. It would likely be from the finance office. I know Deputy Clerk Kaufman will be very excited to say goodbye to our copier on this one.
Yes, it was not behaving
Yes,
this
I was
morning
gonna
at
say.
all. None of us were able to, or I wasn't able to get any copies.
So the service contract is this just for, we're going to see more details on that, or?
It's in negotiation right now. So our attorneys made some revisions and sent it to them to review. But our time frame is fairly short because we're looking at switching the copiers end of November.
December 3rd right
Okay.
now is the install date planned. We did receive back from them some changes from the amendments that we had proposed. So we're just kind of working through all of that, trying to find something we could all agree on.
So this is our last opportunity before the switches happens because there's, as Mr. Bauer mentioned, there's 3 firms in the works. And so we've already let the other firms know they need to come and pick up their equipment at the same time under contract. So that's why it's before you today, and the full contract isn't included in the packet.
One other thing I didn't mention is that we did save some additional funds as well. All Copy is not going to charge us to pick up their current machines that they have at the sheriff's office. 3 over there that represented about $500, $600 in savings for us. So
Will they be getting new ones too then?
yes,
So
they were due for
countywide.
replacement on a 5-year replacement cycle anyway. So
Great.
we'll be getting new machines across the whole county.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
No.
Okay.
Saving money is always a good thing.
One thing that went down.
Right, one thing that went down. Madam Chair, I move that we adopt Resolution 24-152. This is awarding a contract to All Copy Products Incorporated for the lease of multifunction copiers and associated maintenance and supply service with a not to exceed cost of $22,932.48 annually, and also authorizing the county manager to execute the contract.
Second.
Okay, having the motion in a second, all in favor?
Aye.
And resolution 24-152 is adopted 3-0. Thank you. And then we'll go on now to 24-157, adopting the comprehensive fee schedule. And Sam, you're up here still for that?
Right. Pen, I think.
Thank you.
So as the board is aware, we held a number of work sessions on this topic for each of the various departments that have requested changes to the fee schedule. From the last time you've seen this, there hasn't been a ton of changes. Most of those that you will see are under the community development section. So I would invite Director Gutierrez to come up if you could just do a quick summary of those changes.
I haven't changed anything since the work session, but we did work on the format.
Great.
And the fee area changes include the treasurer's office. There was a work session on that. It includes solid waste. There was a lengthy discussion on that. And then Parks and Recreation. Did I capture all the changes?
Community development, CSU extension,
Okay.
with one addition there. And then under the county manager's office as well. Two additions of fees we've already been charging that were just not included, that being the rental fee for this room, in addition to our Cora fee standards. So other than that, it remains unchanged. There was some requests from the board last week to have some different fee structures drawn up for Parks and Recreation. One specifically that would not raise rates for residents. You did receive that via email directly from Director Chisholm.
Right.
The version you see in front of you was as presented as far as Parks and Recreation was last week, does not include, or I should say includes raising rates for residents as well.
And once or if this is approved by the board, then we'll do the calculations behind the scenes and reflect the increase in revenue in the 25 budget as well.
Well, I thought I would see on this presentation, the request that we got from Director Chisholm to not include increases in residence fees, but only on non-resident and activities.
Actually, I'm looking at mine and it does say the only changes I haven't read are the non-resident.
Right.
On the copy that we have.
On page 13.
Page, yeah, 13, 15.
That's the version I have as well.
So that does reflect the request.
For the drop in.
Do you intend to give us?
Sure, great.
Which I think that was the board majority was to.
Yeah. I sent an email, looking at right now, last week.
That's one.
Only increasing fees for non-residents for user fees. And then we increased the senior age to 65. And then all program and rental fees were accepted. And that's it.
Can you remind me like what the revenue difference would be?
Yeah. So if we were to sell the same amount of passes that we did in 2023, if we were to increase not residents and non-residents user fees, a projected amount was 134,000, but only increasing non-residents is about 115,000. So about $20,000 difference.
I know in our work session, we discussed doing this for 1 year, because next year the plan is to implement some kind of a formula or justification for fee increases countywide, including Parks and Recreation, so they're not just random.
Yeah, concentrating on a percentage of cost recovery.
So just to throw that out there, that probably for 2026, they'll be increased. We just don't know how much, but to give a reprieve this 1 year. Would you, I know this isn't a work session, but are you okay with that if that's what we adopt?
I think so, just so we kind of have some direction on how much we're supposed to be recovering.
Right, right.
Yeah, going forward, or,
To
yeah,
be
make it,
determined, yeah.
make things clear.
And then it's more logical for our residents to know
Mhm.
what
Right.
things are happening.
Right. Well, I'm glad that we had that discussion. Yeah. I know that it was also asked if we're at a time where all seniors could be free, and that was not advised, given that there's two options, either people that maybe struggle could contact the friends or.
So we have 3 insurance group options that folks can participate in. If they're not on an insurance group, they can apply through the senior services. And then if they don't want to do that, they could apply through the HARP fund.
Right. Yeah.
So there's options for people.
Yeah.
And that way everyone has a chance to utilize the community center and the programs.
Well, I want to bring up the elephant in the room is the Blackhawk IGA is still on the table for $1 million for the rec center. And if the board chose to accept that, then we would not have to raise fees for this year or for 2025.
That's kind of an assumption. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're not discussing what's at the table at this point, is just the comprehensive fee schedule.
I don't think it's the elephant in the room. I
No.
think it's, yeah, anyway, separate to me. I don't have any more questions on that one. Thanks for going with us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and thank you,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone for making changes and all, we appreciate that. So if there are no more questions or comments, go ahead and entertain a motion.
Is this effective today or is this effective
No.
January 1?
So my recommendation of the board is just amend the resolution. It does say adopts the 2025 comprehensive fee schedule, but the add in, which takes effect January 1st of 2025.
And then I'll ask, I had mentioned that potential conflict to vote on it because we're not changing the fee for building.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting us know. I don't see a conflict.
Okay.
You're free to vote.
Thank you.
Say January 1, 2025.
Correct.
Okay.
Although you're not open that day, right? Yeah.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay, Madam Chairman, motion to accept Resolution 24-157, adopting the 2025 comprehensive fee schedule to become active on January 1, 2025.
I'll second.
Okay, having the motion in a second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Nay?
And the resolution is adopted 2-1. Okay, great. Thank you,
you.
everyone. And now we'll go on to the county attorney's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's an attachment on the agenda referencing the matters that we have worked on since we last had an opportunity to sit with you. Many of we have reviewed 9 different matters, some of which you already heard about today and acted on it. We continue to negotiate some of these other things. We've also provided ongoing legal advice and research relative to a variety of issues that face the county from time to time. Sarah Bajek has been good at bringing these things to our attention, and we are working through them as directed by county. So I can speak specifically about any of these that are there, but that's kind of what we've been up to. Been busy.
I just have clarification on item I, this is JR engineering contract. Which one is that?
That is a contract that is still being reviewed by my office. It has to do with the public works improvement, if I believe right.
It's the South Beaver Creek roadway engineering. We were hoping to get it on this agenda, but we were not able to make it, unfortunately.
Thank you.
I just want to express my appreciation for your firm's involvement on election day, but also for moving some of these things forward. For example, the childcare lease today, they had stagnated a bit, and it's really nice to be able to move the work forward and accomplish things for the community.
It's our pleasure.
So, thank you.
I want to also get, thank you for your, the effort you put into our contracts. I know in the past couple of years, getting contracts approved and reviewed by legal has been difficult, so they're very timely. That's good.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. Or no, I'm sorry, I'm on a roll here. So if there are no other, I know, okay. Now if we'll go ahead and no other questions, we can go to the county manager's report.
Thank you, commissioners. You have my report in front of you. I'll hit a few highlights. This is the only meeting for November. So our next meeting will be December 10th. The work session is tentatively scheduled for December 9th, Monday before. The only topic is employee handbook. There's a lot of updates we're looking on, working through that, as well as working through some other ideas through HR. At this point, we may not have any topics for December 9th, unless the board really wants to have a discussion on the employee handbook. My thought is to delay that until January, but it's up to the board as to what your preferences.
Was that brought up by staff or?
We update the employee handbook every year around November, December, so it's an annual update. It's, most of the time it's tied to law, updates in law. But then we're also looking at some other elements of our benefit package we want to have a conversation with the board on that ties into the employee handbook. So that's broadly what the topic would be. The draft budget work sessions, as the board's aware, we've completed all of those work sessions. So the finance office is working to finalize that and get up-to-date factual information between now and the point for adoption, which is the 10th of December.
What changes are we going to see? Just the changes on the fee schedule?
Any factual changes, so any updated factual, so this is a perfect example, update in the fee schedule, so any estimates and fees would be adjusted based on the action of the board. So it's only factual changes that we know or have estimates of what they would change, but nothing else would change from the budget. And if there is any changes, we will be bringing that to you and highlighting that very clearly. But at this point, no material changes from the draft budget the board has discussed.
A question, would the reserve budget description be in the
Yes.
budget as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
There's a sheet in that. The county received the award for the Rollinsville planning grant, which includes infrastructure, up to $125,000. South Beaver Creek engineering RFP, it's been delayed. We're working through all of that. So the public meetings that we had hoped to do something in Q4 of this year, it's really not feasible. Since the first time we're going to be able to award the contract would be December 10th. So we're looking at pushing everything off to Q1 for the public meetings on South Beaver and creating a timeline associated from that. Copy our RFP that was awarded today after quite a long process. We've been talking about that. That's exciting with the cost savings. Broadband grants have been submitted for the BEAD funding end of October. The SOB study, as you're aware, has been completed, getting a number of things off the list. It's really quite exciting. Housing needs assessment has also been completed. The CWPP is in the final draft of review, so it's close to being shared publicly, but not quite yet. GAA activities, as I shared with the board, I'm going to be um, looking for a reduction of our contribution for next year beyond just 1%, so somewhere between 5 to 1%. Stay tuned for that. So that would be one element that will change in the budget for 25. CCEDC activities. I did invite them to come today, as well as a representative from the Small Business Administration, but they weren't able to come today. So looking in December to talk about their offerings, as well as how they can support local businesses in Gilpin County. I should also mention that the CCEDC is also looking at expanding the membership or changing the membership. Currently, the membership is exclusive to Clear Creek County, with one representative from Gilpin County, which I currently serve in that role. They are open to opening that up to the business community in Gilpin County. So we're going to be working on that internally. Mountain Kids Early Child Care Lease executed today. This is quite an exciting day. Lots. Rudolph Ranch Homestead due diligence is essentially complete. So we requested to move up the closing date to December 17th. And then attended the Mountain Rail meeting in Arvada a couple weeks ago. And then you can see the community engagement report, making great outreach to the public and internal, external communications. And I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Will the CWPP be on the December 17th agenda?
I don't know yet. I've received the draft and I was unable to get into the draft to make any comments. There's going to be another meeting, I believe, on Friday. So I'll know more on Friday as to kind of the time frame.
Okay.
Also, did you mention that the SLT meeting was going to be canceled? Or something?
It's not. It still will be up, and so I am canceling the SLT in January because I'll be out of town. But the one for tomorrow and December are still on.
It was mentioned that the CCEDC might be able to obtain the average daily population data.
I'm going to have a conversation with them. I think probably CDOT is a better way of going about it, but
You said both, so.
yeah, I think it's going to become an internal project for us to try and determine our average daily population, which swings dramatically. Now, I know there's a traffic count at the end of the Parkway and I-70. There's also ones on 119 and 6 in those areas. So we just need to gain access to that. Ideally, we would get that information as well to kind of clean it up through the casinos, but they're not eager to share that kind of information. So I think really the trip data is the best way of doing that. But it's important for us to have that data for future studies that we know what our average population is in the county. And that's not just the casino towns, the Central City Blackhawk, but also the county as a whole with the state park and national forest, that Toland area. Clearly, we have a lot of visitors to Gilpin County. We need to get a better sense of those.
Yeah, and the state forest has a lot of numbers. They keep track of that. And would the Silver Dollar District be able to give at least some kind of a neutral but general number?
I can
have to
engage,
ask.
and hopefully the numbers that I've heard is generally around 20,000 in the casino towns in any given day. And then it would go higher on the weekends or in the summers. But again, I don't have any data, any facts to share on that. And I've heard numbers up to 100,000, so.
Right, probably depending.
Depends on the day, huh?
Yes.
If they have some event going on.
Right.
Well, yeah. Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments? No. Okay, then we'll move on for, again, public or press comment. This is limited to 3 minutes for each person. And do we have anyone signed up? No. And is there anyone online?
No one online, Commissioner Brewman, but I did have the question, is the preference for the board for the work session on December 9th to have it or not? It can be pushed to January. Is their preference?
I'm fine not having it if we're just meeting to, it's not really ready, and I'd
It's not
rather
ready.
wait.
It's
Yeah,
gonna be an
there's
internal.
only that one.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'll
If
I'll look
it's
to postpone
ready.
it then.
Sure.
Okay,
I have no opinion.
you do. You do until January.
Okay, we'll wait till January.
Okay, so we don't have anyone else. Okay, and now the Board of County Commissioners report some notice of public meetings. I guess I can say quickly, we attended, or myself and Commissioner Hollingsworth attended the CCAT conference in Denver for 2 days, and that was mainly discussing legislative priorities that we'd be taking, and a lot of them are also in line or seeing what we work in line with the CCI commissioners group as well. I also attended the CCEDC. I'm on their loan committee, so we had a loan summary for the year meeting, and I also stayed and attended the board meeting. Also, they're willing to work and do some public information meetings, or I guess seminars with these small business loan administration as well. So that would be a great resource for people who are currently have businesses in Gilpin and looking to expand, or for people who are thinking of having a business. That would give some information and possibly some loan opportunities for them as well. And yes, they are looking forward to working more and in expanding the board to include Gilpin for more activity there. So that's something that's would be, great and help us out there. Also been working on the failing septics legislation that is a county we were looking towards presenting. Working with our Director of Public Health. It's been presented to the CALFO organization where there was support, and also attended a meeting of the Colorado Environmental Managers Group, and they were also very enthusiastic about it. So an email has been sent out to the groups for people who are specifically interested in this and willing to work on a committee or group to push it forward with more information. Also, there's Jefferson County has expressed interest in it as well for their rural areas. So that's moving forward. Any questions regarding that?
No, but I did hear from Representative-elect Leslie Smith
Mhm.
that she had talked to Senator Roberts, and she's going to pick up that bill.
Right, we
Yeah,
contacted
yeah.
her with some of
So
the
it's great.
specifics, so
Yeah.
she is, it needs, since there'll be a kind of a spending or monetary request there that it needs to come from the House, so she will be working on that.
Yeah.
And then also, I believe we'll see about presenting with, to Senator Cutter as well. So there'll be some.
Is that
support.
being working through CCAT or CCI, or this is just?
No, this is just individuals, the CALFO group and the Colorado Environmental Managers Group.
But our own representative is picking it up.
Yeah,
so
our
that's-
representatives are.
So that's
picking it up,
exciting.
So that's good. And
Um,
then, if you want to go.
Oh, sure. I would just add at the CCAT retreat that we attended, we did get to sit with the chair of the JBC. She was telling us about the planning and the needed cuts at the state level and ideas that they have pending. And then also we met the new lobbying group for CCAT. So that was good to spend some time with them, and we all talked about priorities, inter-county, which kind of fell on human services, basic needs, safety net services as a high priority for funding. And then, of course, law enforcement. Yes. So I attended the GROC, the Opioid Council, and there's a new executive director, Dr. Shore. So we were able to meet her, and we had help with the interview process for that. I also attended the CCI had a session on the Medicaid inmate exemption. As you might recall from previous meetings, the state has applied for a waiver, which probably would take effect in 25 for 26 funding. So that could support our jails a bit. And then I had fun at the spooky stroll. Oh, Gabriel's gone, but that was really fun. Then also attended the Mountain Rail Open House. And then we also did final interviews for the NOCO facilitator. The one that's been there for the better part of 10 years is retiring. And so we are in the process of hiring down to 2 finalists. Then with Jefferson Center, we did the CEO evaluation, which was tough after the layoffs that they had. So she's requested taking no bonus because of the balance there. And then I attended the Watershed Wildfire Ready session. That's it.
I just want to let everybody know that hopefully they had a great Veterans Day. Yesterday was Veterans Day and had an opportunity to thank a veteran. I know I did. So I really appreciate all the sacrifices and the hard work and, you know, putting their lives on hold to serve the community and serve the citizens of the United States. I also attended the Mountain Rail meeting in Arvada. It was pretty much focused and in Arvada, not so much in Gilpin County, but I think the presence, you know, my presence and Ray's presence and Commissioner Helmsbury's presence there was a reminder to them that we're still interested in trying to get a rail stop in Gilpin County. So keep pushing on that. And then I want to let you know that this Friday, my husband and I are going to be donating $5,000 to the senior program. And we are invited to go meet them at their lunch and be able to present that to them. It's a group that I'm very concerned about and more than willing to help. So that's all I have.
Okay. Then
I was just going to say that's very generous of you and Steve to do that.
Notice of public meetings. Our next Board of County Commissioners meeting will be December 10th at 9 a.m. here at the courthouse. And it seems like our work session for the 9th was probably tentative, but looking
Probably
towards
canceled at this point.
cancel it.
Yeah.
And then just notice that the offices, the county offices will be closed for the holiday on November 28th, which is Thanksgiving. And is there anything else? Any other meetings? That's it. Okay. Having no other business to conduct, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. The time is 11:47 a.m. And thank you.